I blinked and looked at the contents of the cardboard box I had found on my front doorstep. I frowned, confused. I took out the small shrink-wrapped package and looked at the brightly colored label on the front. It displayed a drawing depicting what I assumed was a family of bizarre-looking half-human, half-aquatic creatures grinning and waving in the general direction of anyone holding the package, as I was, with air bubbles rising above them and normal fish swimming around to indicate they were underwater. The drawing was rather disturbing. It didn't look like your typical illustration of cute, anthropomorphic cartoon creatures like you might see on the packaging of a product aimed at kids. No, this looked way too realistic. The creatures were rendered in great detail. Humanoid beings with scaly bodies, webbed fingers and toes, and gills in their sides. The textures of their bodies and the colors were so vivid. It was almost like looking at a photograph. There was something about the way they were smiling. Not bright, exaggerated tooth-bearing friendly smiles, but closed-mouthed, tight-lipped, almost malicious smirks. And they almost seemed to have a predatory gleam in their eyes. It creeped me out a little. I looked at the writing beneath the illustration, trying to make sense of it. It was a bizarre hodgepodge of Kasi English and some language I didn't recognize. Hey kidders, new from Dagon Industries. Grow your own fish, people. Yagthula, Hawazwal, Vugarulthula. Make rainy day lot exciting. Fun in all ages. Kathat Kumukola. Just follow easy fun instructions. Pegrablub. And know it before, you will grow your own fish, people. Shadthalaxamandoth. I blinked, trying to comprehend the gibberish. Okay, I said out loud. Obviously, whoever had designed the label didn't have a very good grasp on the English language. Grow your own fish, people. Something clicked for me right then. I remembered seeing ads for this kind of thing in my dad's old comic books when I was a kid. Sea monkeys. I smirked a little at the memory. The picture in the comic books was of an adorable family of sea creatures with human characteristics in an aquarium. Even as a kid, I had known it was bullshit. Just like the X-ray glasses or atomic submarine you could send away for. You sent in your money and got back a packet of brined shrimp you could barely see, even with a magnifying glass. Brined shrimp that bore not even the slightest resemblance of the amazing sea monkeys featured in the comic's artwork. I wondered how many kids growing up in the 50s and 60s had fallen for such blatant false advertising and been bitterly disappointed when reality had crushed expectation. I turned the package over in my hands. This must be some foreign knockoff version. But another question was raised in my mind. Who had sent it to me? And why? It certainly wasn't anything I had ordered or been expecting. A wrong address, maybe. I looked at the cardboard box the package had come in. Apart from my name and address, both of which were correct, it was completely blank. No return address, no postage mark, no stamps. Someone must have delivered it to me directly. I scratched my head puzzling over it. I didn't have that many friends and all my relatives lived on the other side of the country. Maybe one of my coworkers had left it for me. Or some random stranger playing a half-assed prank. I shrugged it off and started in the direction of the kitchen trash container to toss the fish people inside. I paused halfway there, considering. It was my day off, and I didn't really have anything else planned. What the fuck not? It wouldn't do any harm, and I was a little curious to see how these things worked. I changed direction and headed for my bedroom. I sat on my bed and pulled the shrink wrap off the package. There was a small plastic aquarium about the size of a coffee can, a small packet labeled Fish People Eggs, another small packet labeled Water Stabilizer, and a small instruction booklet. I opened the booklet and began to read. It was written in the same broken English, interspersed with the gibberish-sounding language that was printed on the front label. Welcomes of you for the incredible is amazing world of fish people. Haubcalculable, Akfotel Grub, Vundrak Gogul, Rumbalava. To start his wonderful adventure must for you, first put 1 Flogray Ludo, half gallon, distilled water in fish people container. Erdyep Gwala, Katula Zel. I placed the plastic aquarium on my desk, then got the gallon jug of distilled water I used in my CPAP, and carefully poured it in until it reached the measuring line marked half gallon. I looked at the instructions. Next steps, open up the packet, read water stabilizer, and putting it, Roluf Begalaturus, in water. I tore open the packet and poured its contents, a fine white powder, into the water, which began to foam and fizz like Alka-Seltzer. I read the instructions. Let's stand for time 30 hukuls, minutes. So that is water absorbed stabilizer. I shrugged, looked at my watch, and decided to make myself some lunch while the powder dissolved in the water. 30 minutes later, after a lunch of Kraft mac and cheese and fried Spam slices. Yeah, I admit, I'm not much of a cook. I came back into my room to find the water had stopped fizzing, but was now cloudy white. I read the instructions. Open of the packet, read fish people eggs, and putting it, Dragulan Danabula, in water. I opened the packet and poured its contents, a grainy brown substance like sand, into the water. I looked at the last of the instructions and, what the fuck? I muttered to myself, bewildered. I rubbed my eyes, read it again. Now was time to make chant following words in order, give fish people crossover into world from the realm of Distashba, eternal darkness that they live in land of light forever. I was dumbfounded. Since when did making brine shrimp hatch entail having to say a fucking chant? This whole thing had to be some kind of practical joke. Still, what could it hurt? I began to carefully enunciate the strange guttural words that had been spelled out phonetically beneath the final instruction. As soon as I finished speaking the last word, I glanced at the aquarium on my desk and felt my blood turn to ice water in my veins. The cloudy, whitish water had changed to a murky ink black color, and it was bubbling violently, like boiling water on a stove. And it stank. The smell was nauseating, unlike anything I had ever encountered before. A stench of stagnant water combined with a putrid odor of rotting fish. I stood there, transfixed in shock, watching as something began to thrash around inside the aquarium, causing water to splash over the side. I couldn't quite see what it was because of how dark the water was, but I could hear it slapping violently against the plastic. Crack. I watched, feeling numb and unreal as if I were in a dream, as the plastic aquarium began to splinter, water trickling out through the cracks. Suddenly, the aquarium shattered, water and fragments of plastic exploding in every direction. Something lay atop my desk in a puddle of the black water. No, several somethings. They resembled deformed eels or snakes. They squirmed around hideously, then slithered off my desk, plopping to the floor with a sickening wet thud. Before my disbelieving eyes, they started to change and grow. They elongated and grew thicker. One end of them thinned out, tapering down to a round bulbous shape, a shape that was unmistakably that of a head. 4 tendrils emerged from each of the things, tendrils which began to form into limbs. The things from the aquarium began to fill out, taking shape. Their limbs grew longer, their bodies began to develop, their features becoming more distinct. This all happened in probably less than 2 minutes, but when I think back on it, it seemed to take much longer. 12 grotesque humanoid figures, their slick, glistening bodies covered in scales, began to painfully struggle to their feet, emitting hideous, unearthly high squeals. My paralysis broke. I turned and fled my bedroom, slamming the door. I raced down my hallway, pausing just long enough to grab my keys and phone from the table, then ran outside to my car, my heart racing. As I dialed 911, I heard a splintering crash in my house. I held my phone to my ear, my eyes locked on the front of my house. The dispatcher spoke. 911, what is your emergency? I briefly considered what to say. Help, I accidentally spawned an army of mutant fish monsters in my house. Before deciding to just tell her there was a burglary in progress, I gave her my address, then waited several minutes until the police arrived. There were no more noises from my house. The officers told me to wait where I was, then drew their pistols and cautiously entered. I waited, tense and fearful, for whatever was going to happen next. Any second I expected to hear screams and gunshots. 20 minutes passed. To my relief, both officers stepped back outside, holstering their guns. They told me there was no one in the house, but someone had made a mess in my bedroom and broken down the door. There was water and broken plastic in my room, and several pairs of wet footprints leading to my back door, which had been standing wide open. A pair of detectives showed up to do a routine investigation, dusting for prints and collecting evidence, since there had been several burglaries in the neighborhood recently. I gave the police a statement, thanking them for their time, and they left. One of the detectives told me I should invest some money in a home security system in the future. I went back into my house, shaken and disturbed by what had just happened. It didn't feel real. I wanted to believe it had just been a hallucination or a bad dream, but the shattered remains of the aquarium were still in my room, and the packaging the kit had come in was still on my bed. I slept with the lights on that night. I didn't fall asleep for a long time. That happened last month and I still can't explain it. I've done dozens of searches online for a Dagon Industries and have never found anything relevant. They don't seem to exist. The hell were those things? Who sent them to me and why? Something else has been bothering me lately. Recently, several kids have disappeared from the area. The police have no leads. None of the disappearances have any apparent connection, except for one thing. All of the missing kids were last seen near a body of water.